Penn Live right here. Johnny McGonigal, Max Ralph. It's a Thursday. It's noon. It's time for a live podcast. Hang out with us. Ask some questions in the chat if you're hanging out with us live. If not, if you're listening to this later on Friday, over the weekend, maybe even early next week, hope you like what you hear. We're going to be talking a lot about Penn State recruiting today. The Nittany Lions are on a hot streak. James Franklin and his staff doing a really good job in the 2026 class already. And they've got a lot of official visit weekends coming up and starting this weekend. This is when it really gets interesting, Max. Some big names on campus, expected to be on campus this weekend and over the next few weekends. But Penn State, they've started out really well in May. 4 names added already this month to the 2026 recruiting class that has 17 members right now and ranks as high as number 4 in the country by 24/7 Sports, behind only USC, Notre Dame, Ohio State. So good company to keep, Max. Mm-hmm. And let's talk some Cruton. Let's do it up today.
Let's absolutely talk some Cruton, Johnny. I think we've gotten used to seeing this hot streak from Penn State kind of begin in the summer. I feel like the past couple of years, it's always been around the 4th of July. Like, for whatever reason, kids like to commit on the holiday every year. I think last year it was LeVar Arrington II. Years before that, it was Zane Durant and like 3 other guys on the 4th. But it started early this year. And, the official visits are starting a little bit early too. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and look, but a May 16th official visit weekend is a pretty early one in recent history. It's a big one for Penn State, but to push it beyond May even, it's 9 commitments since spring practices started on March 25th. 9 guys in less than 2 months' time. They've had a ton of guys on campus. They really, really maximized the window of having unofficials, getting guys to campus in the spring. And the product's really sold so far in spring practice. I mean, every time we were out there, we saw guys at practice, and, they do a good job on those visits, of course. And it's really paid off in this class. I mean, we're going to talk about, what's to come with the official visits, but we're also going to talk a little bit about what this class has right now. And, it's pretty impressive. Like, some of it comes from the volume so early in the process. When you have 17 guys committed, it helps your rankings a little bit. Volume does matter. But, it's still a good class with a lot of really good talent, across the board. So it's a big one, but, to not look too far in the future for now, this official visit weekend, Johnny, has the potential to be, one of the most important ones for Penn State in this recruiting class, because when you look at the fact that they're ranked number 4 in the country right now, and you think about the ways that this class can take the next step to being, to staying in that top 5 conversation, it really, starts and ends with a guy like Joey O'Brien over at LaSalle. The safety recently got his 5th star on 24/7 Sports. In their composite rankings, he's the number 2 player in Pennsylvania, the number 6 safety in the country. He is a really good player. And there are, there's a lot of things that go into this because, yes, he's a great player in the state of Pennsylvania. He also goes to LaSalle, which is where Abdul came from. And, turns out a lot of talent every year. And Penn State would love to keep that connection going and say, hey, look, we just had one of your guys get drafted number 3 overall. Here's another one of your guys that's coming to campus. He's one of the keys to this class, staying where it is and continuing this trajectory. He's going to be on campus this weekend, among a couple of other, good-sized names. It's not a full-sized official visit list this weekend. It's a little bit abbreviated, but Joey O'Brien's the headliner, Johnny, and Penn State has to do anything it can to get him.
Yeah, Joey O'Brien, like you mentioned, arguably the top player in Pennsylvania, one of the top prospects in the country, and he's getting the attention that goes along with that as well. He was just out at Oregon during the spring It seems like Dan Lanning and the Ducks are making some headway there. I think he also has officials lined up with Notre Dame, with Tennessee. So he's making his way across the country as he should if you're a player of that caliber. But at the same time, Penn State, who they've done a really good job already in Pennsylvania in this class. I think it's 5 of the top 11 guys, depending on where you look in terms of your recruiting service of choice. But they've kept a lot of the top talent home already. You talk about Peyton Falzone, the quarterback from Nazareth, Alex Haskell committing recently from St. Joe's Prep, the defensive lineman, Terry Wiggins, the linebacker from Coatesville, who committed recently as well a couple weeks ago. I mean, you go on down the list, David Davis from Pittsburgh, Matt Sieg, the safety out of Fort Cherry. It's just, and obviously the 2 Harrisburg stars, Kevin Brown, and the offensive lineman and Messiah Mickens, both from Harrisburg. So it's been a really good class already to Penn State in terms of the dominate the state, keep the best in PA, stay in PA. But Joey O'Brien is one of, if not the guy at the top of Penn State's big board, and having him in town this weekend is going to go a long way in determining whether or not he's in the Nittany Lion.
Yeah, I think it's an important flip too for Penn State because it ended up being an okay class in the state in the class of 2025 this past year. But really, it took kind of a flurry at the end of the recruiting cycle for Penn State to get there. I mean, you think about the number 1 prospect ending up in their class, Andrew Olesh, signed, 2 days after signing day when the window was still open and closing. It took a lot to be able to get him back into the fold. I mean, they had Deshaun Burnett, they had Alex Tash, they had Tyke Hayes, but Cam Smith was another guy who flipped late. I mean, it wasn't an incredible effort in the state like, James Franklin and Penn State have mostly become accustomed to over the last 5 years or so. They've really turned it around. But it seems to be that they're back on track this year because especially the 2 Harrisburg kids, it's hard to overstate just how important it is to keep that in-state talent home. But O'Brien is really, really the next step. Beyond Joey O'Brien this weekend, I mean, it's still a really big visit. There's one that, kind of the 1A and 1B, or if you want to put it that way, Kari Adams, the corner from Maryland. He's the number 10 cornerback in the country, number 4 player in Maryland. But interestingly enough, he moved up his official visit date to this weekend. So, Terry Smith and Anthony Poindexter have done some really good work together over the last 5 years, whether it's on the field, whether it's recruiting, whatever it is. But those 2 are going to have to be firing on all cylinders this weekend because they've got 2 of the best corners in the country, 2 of the best defensive backs, rather, and 2 guys who are remaining at the top of Penn State's board.
Yeah, and they just visited Kari Adams recently for an in-home earlier this month. So to see that move up early was interesting. Maybe just to have it in line with Joey O'Brien and bounce some ideas off of potentially both of them joining Penn State. Like, this is one where, and not saying they're going to commit after this weekend because those are 2 of the top players in the country. Penn State has done, and this is just something, a point that I know you mentioned just to drive home, like Penn State has done a really good job so far, like really good job in this class. But there are certain players that kind of push your class over the edge when all is said and done, when the dust settles on these rankings, and when pen goes to paper. I don't think that really happens anymore, actually. But maybe in December,
there are papers. It's not the national letter of intent anymore.
The fax machines are no longer a thing.
That's right.
But when the dust settles in December, when signing day actually happens, you look back on a class, and these are the kind of players you're going to look back on. It's Joey O'Brien. You hit on him. Kari Adams, Luke Wafel, the defensive lineman from New Jersey, whose brother is on campus, and Penn State just recently made his top 4. He'll be on campus for an official, I believe, in early June. Like, these are the kind of guys that don't make or break your class, but take it from great to elite, to steal a line from James Franklin earlier in his tenure, speaking about something completely different, not recruiting.
Johnny, I don't recall that one. What are you talking about?
Everyone should know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a big weekend. It's a big weekend for Penn State, and we'll see how they come out of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, just to add on, you mentioned Luke Wafel. He's another one that's just huge. Carter Meadows, another edge from the region here that, is they're trying to get on campus for this summer. Emmanuel Iheanacho, a tackle, offensive lineman. Maybe not the leader for him right now, but a Maryland guy. It's official visit season. And I would actually say, like, the work that Penn State did over the spring to get those 9 commitments and get this base of a 17 commit class so far is hugely important because the groundwork is laid. Like, you've got these 17 guys who, by the way, like, you and I have both talked to a really big handful of these commits so far. Like, they're really into this thing. Like, they are committed to Penn State big time. A lot of these guys are really going to work for Penn State on the recruiting trail. So you have this solid base of talent. You can really focus and drive hard. You can go get those big fish now. You're not spending these official visit weekends trying to convince, certain positions of need to come. I mean, look, Penn State still has the guys they're targeting that aren't going to be as high on the radar. I mean, there are, typically they're going to take 25, 26 recruits in a class. But this class right now is really solid. It has talent at pretty much every position across the board that the staff likes. And like I said, you can go out and you can go get those big names now. You can really focus your recruiting pitch in on them. And of course, we're used to seeing as well an official visit weekend where a lot of the committed guys are all together. And there's 1 or 2 names there that Penn State's trying to drive home as well. So, this weekend, those 2 defensive backs are the big ones. And, beyond that, there are going to be some big names coming, and I'm curious to see how it goes. But Johnny, just before I let you go on that point, I want to put in there 2 more big names that are supposed to visit this weekend to Penn State. Things can always change late in the process, but Sincere Johnson, linebacker / edge rusher from Ohio. He's the number 3 prospect in the state over there. 24/7 has him as the number 11 edge from the Cleveland area. Penn State had some success last year with Chaz Coleman with a Cleveland area edge, and then Messiah Hampton, wide receiver from New York, who's number 11 in the country at his position. They've got a handful of wide receivers already committed in this class, but it's a position that is constantly under rebuild still for Penn State, and he's a talented one.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was actually just going to go to a comment that we got in our chat here from R Seeker saying there's now better balance across positions with recruits, not all CBs and TEs. And yeah, you look at what Penn State has in their class now. They've got 3 receivers already. You mentioned Messiah Hampton, and they would love to take him. And I'm sure they would take a 4th receiver if he's talented enough and wants to come to Penn State.
Right.
Of course, you take as many shots on receivers as you can, especially we know given Penn State's relative struggles at that position over the last few years, especially in developing some of that talent, that top end talent that they've got. But you've got 3 receivers in already. Jasir Rogers, committed early ish. LeVar Keys from DeMatha was in already. And then you add a Davion Brown on Monday. I mean, you bring in 3 guys already. That's a good base to work from. You've got 2 quarterbacks in this group already, and Peyton Falzone and Troy from out in California. Like, when you're adding these positions, 2 linebackers now with Matthew Lama in the fold and Terry Wiggins. There's urgency on Penn State's end, or a comfort in getting that number already up to 17. But also on the flip side, if you're a recruit, like, I think this was a little surprising to see this big of a flurry before official visit season. But talking to Matthew Lama, earlier this week, and him saying, well, Terry is already committed. Terry Wiggins is already in the class. I know they were going to take 2 or 3 linebackers in this class. I don't want to miss my spot if I feel comfortable, in committing to Penn State, knowing that's ultimately where I wanted to go. And so I think you're seeing that kind of across the board. It's like once one guy, hops on board, it's like, well, I don't want to miss out, and then they don't have a spot for me. So I think that's at least a part of the reason, but it is really important that they've been able to build this foundation and get as many guys in the fold that go to, go on the recruiting trail basically for you and recruit for you and texting and messaging a lot of these other recruits.
Yeah, it's been like I said a little bit ago. Like these guys are really committed to Penn State. I can't. I feel like the number of guys in this class that have said Penn State was my dream school all along is maybe higher than the past years. Like maybe that's just a feeling, like a recency bias thing for me. But it seems like a lot of guys have said that. I got off the phone with Isaac Chukura, one of the D line commits recently. Peyton Falzone, the Nazareth QB, was like that. I mean, and those two guys too. Those are interesting ones because they had to work to earn their offers. Like Falzone was offered as an athlete right away, worked on his quarterbacking with Brad Mendler, Drew Aller's quarterback coach as well. Chukura had to, go through the motions of a combine. He had to show Penn State what he could do on the field. And, then they offered him and he committed a week later. It was, like those two guys are interesting, but there are some stories throughout this class right now of guys who are just like really into Penn State. They've got the right attitude. They're good workers. And, guys have been chomping at the bit to commit. But I'd also say like this class got started a long time ago with Messiah Mickens, and then LeVar Keys joined on. Then you get Kevin Brown, sorry for the brain fart there, and Jasier Rogers. And those four guys have been in for a long time. But the two wide receivers, especially, like, the Harrisburg guys are really good players. We've known they're good players. But those two wide receivers, too, are guys who are, pretty underrated for their position, I'd say. Like, Delaware football is not the most talented from a holistic view. And, Jasier is dominating guys out there. But, for down at DeMatha, LeVar, like a lot of the upperclassmen get the attention down there at DeMatha because they just have, they almost have double-digit Division I guys every single year in every class. So, once he gets into his senior season here, he could really be a riser. I've talked to, the head coach down there, Bill McGregor, a lot. He's really impressed by LeVar, has been for a long time. So I just think, like, you just go from top to bottom of the guys who are already committed. And it's a class that, I think you should be really happy about so far, with the potential to, be the highest ranked one in James Franklin's tenure at Penn State.
Don't knock Delaware football talent, Max. Got Chris Godwin coming from Middletown.
Hey.
Denai Dennis Sutton is from Delaware,
Yeah.
even though he's played at Maryland.
Sal Wormley was a Smyrna guy.
Yup. Even shoot, even if you want to go further back, Troy Reeder, even though he ended up transferring to Delaware, he was a good player for Penn State when he was there. Andrew Zerb, I'm just shouting out. I went to Salesianum, so I'm just shouting out Sally's guys now. But no, it's Jasir's a really talented player, and he got slept on earlier in this process. And I think he's going to be one of those risers that you look at the end of this thing, it's like, oh, he's a mid to high 4-star. And, it's because he dominated as a senior. Getting Davion Brown into the mix at wide receiver, though, I think is really important. And I think came as a little bit of a surprise that he committed when he did. But I had the opportunity to talk to him and his head coach from, he's down at Virginia, Trinity Episcopal School in the Richmond area. And speaking to them on Monday, they kind of seemed like, it was a no-brainer that they loved what Penn State had to offer. They loved especially Anthony Poindexter and Marcus Hagans, a couple of former UVA staffers who have a lot of cred down there in the Virginia area on the recruiting trail. The fact that they spearheaded his recruitment, and there's comfort there. There's a comfort factor there. Troy Hoon, for, one of the two quarterback commits in this class, also built a strong bond with Davion Brown. And I think that helps as well. I think they're getting a really fun and electric, explosive kind of player in Davion. His coach compared him to at least just a player comp to Deebo Samuel, the way he's being able to use, use across the offense, both, as a slot guy, outside, even as a running back. He said he's a running back whenever he has the ball in his hands, which, if Andy Kotelnicki is still Penn State's offensive coordinator beyond this season, if he's not a head coach somewhere, I'm sure he'll have a lot of fun using Davion. So adding a player like him, adding a third receiver, and now you can kind of be, taking a fourth if you want to, if it works out that way. I'm sure they would like to, but there's not this added pressure on adding a fourth necessarily. There's not a pressure of, oh shoot, we don't have a quarterback in this class. You've got two. Oh shoot, we don't have a great running back in this class. You've got Messiah Mickens. We don't know. We don't have a linebacker. No, you've got two really good ones. And so I think that frees you up, as you mentioned earlier, Max, to really put in a lot of effort and go full bore on getting these big fish in the door and solidifying one of, if not, it could end up being James Franklin's best class in his tenure at Penn State.
Yeah, he's had two that finished number 6 in the 24/7 Sports Composite. That was Micah Parsons led 2018, and then of course the one we have all become quite familiar with, the 2022 class with Drew Aller, Nick Singleton, and the like. So this one's number 4 right now. It could keep going, but you talked about we've talked so much about like the base that's set right now, but especially with the wide receivers too. It's just completely different than it was a year ago at this time, because a year ago at this time, I'm pretty sure Lyric Samuel was the only one who was committed. And, Penn State was in the heart of this wide receiver, rebuild. We knew that the talent on the team currently was not good enough.
It was wide receiver hell, man. They were in wide receiver hell.
Yes.
That's what they were in.
Yes, they were. And they only had one guy committed. And we went through the summer, like waiting. Jeff Exenor joined. And then they got Kobe Howard in August. But that was one where, because he had a major injury in high school, they needed to see him more on campus. It took a little while for them to say, all right, yes, you can commit to us. Like, this offer is legit. Like, come join us. And of course, through spring ball, and I if any of you are on social media, I think some Kobe Howard practice highlights have been leaked from Kobe himself, and the kid's pretty dynamic. Like, that was a great pickup that went under the radar. That I think he's going to be good, but they didn't get Matt Outen until he flipped in the fall, late in the fall from Virginia Tech. Like, this is a completely different cycle right now. Penn State had to work its butt off at the end of last year to get a lot of guys. They flipped out, and they got Kobe in August. They got Olesh like right around signing day. They got Brian Kortovich right around signing day. I could go down. Cam Smith was in the fall. Like, they had to work hard for the class that they got last year, and there's talent in it. But this year, a lot of guys already in the fold, and a talented class at that. And I think, not to say that Penn State is going to be able to take a deep breath at any point, because in today's recruiting, you have to keep recruiting your own guys, like from the day they commit to signing day. It's just the way it works. People are coming for every guy in every recruiting class. It's just the way it goes. But Penn State's in really good shape. And, just to reiterate one more time, there are big fish that are coming this summer. We mentioned the Luke Wafels, the Joey O'Briens, the Kari Adams, the Carter Meadows. I'm probably missing a few really big ones that Penn State is in the fold for, but this class could be elite, and it's going to come down to those ones over the official visits.
Just one other point I wanted to add on, the run that they've been on, the foundation that they've set, and like you mentioned, Max, going after some of these bigger names now. And it's something that we've talked about, before in the past. And it's the why. Like, why are they in a position that they're in right now?
Yep.
A part of it is the stability of James Franklin. A part of it is certainly increased NIL efforts and being, having more resources and having more, as James likes to call it, alignment from the top with the athletic director and the president, and having, being able to go into battle for some of these guys that maybe in the past they weren't able to. It's not just the transfer portal, it's recruiting as well. But that stability on the coaching staff is huge too. We've talked about Terry Smith and Anthony Poindexter. Phil Troutline is a big part of this. Dan Connor working his way up from grad assistant to linebackers coach, like talking to both Terry Wiggins and Matthew Lama. Dan Connor was such a big part of all this for them. The fact that, he's not only done it at the NFL level, he's done it at Penn State. He's the program's all-time leading tackler, and he's just no BS. And I think what a lot of these guys on the staff have done is they've taken that approach. Is they're not going to BS a kid. They're not going to make promises they can't keep. And I think a lot when it's really tough to sift through what's true and what's not, in this NIL era, I think that goes a long way with a certain type of prospect. And so clearly it's gone a long way with the guys that Penn State have already brought into the fold, not just in this class, but in the previous class as well. And then, you look at the top in the coaching staff, Andy Kotelnicki and obviously Jim Knowles coming in, right? Like those two guys being spearheading it from the top on both sides of the ball, and having the national recognition and having the track record of success. I just think this staff, like James Franklin, will get a lot of credit. Will get a lot of blame when things go wrong. But in terms of the credit, I do think with this recruiting class and the efforts that they put forth so far, definitely needs to be spread around to the assistants.
Yeah, I mean, it's especially interesting too, because when you think about what college football has become right now, as far as coaching staffs go, where you get analysts on the field, a lot of things have changed in the way that this all works. And because of the NIL, because of the transfer portal, because James Franklin basically has to be his own GM these days, he has to be kind of the CEO of the program. Even the coordinators don't really do that much recruiting themselves anymore. You used to see a lot more from, especially on the offensive and defensive sides of the ball, like the coordinators there used to do a lot of recruiting too. But Andy Kotelnicki and Jim Knowles don't have to do it right now, and their resumes do speak for themselves. But a lot of credit to the assistants. The last thing that I want to say, you mentioned the knowing what's real and what's not in this NIL era. And if any of you missed my story this week that's over on Penn Live about Darrell Carey, the safety from DeMatha Catholic, he gave one of the best quotes that like I've gotten from a high school kid. The gist of it was, a lot of these schools just want to talk about money with me. It's the first thing that they say when I go on a visit. They tell me blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, that's just, you're trying to buy me. He said, I haven't even talked about money with Penn State yet. Like, I know it's going to come, but I love the way this coaching staff treats me. You mentioned Anthony Poindexter. He's really close with Dex. And I just think that, like, it can be a cliche thing, but Penn State does still put a lot of effort into recruiting an individual over, recruiting a football player, which, you hear that from families of recruits all the time these days. And it doesn't happen everywhere. It's not to say that Penn State's the only school that does that, but it does not happen everywhere. And, it does attract a certain type of, recruit over some others, and, for better or worse, like, some of the top prospects in the country do just want to talk about money, and Penn State isn't going to be in the fold for those guys. And, James Franklin doesn't necessarily want to be in the fold for that type of guy. That's not the program he's built here, but I do think it's really interesting, just the recruiting pitch that Penn State has held throughout all these changes and continues to hold. And so far it's worked this year.
Yeah, and building off of that, I actually pulled it up. I'm going to read you a quote from Davion Brown from the conversation I had with him on Monday. That story published earlier this week. Both what he said and explaining his commitment, but also talking to his coach about what kind of player Penn State is getting. Check that out if you haven't already. But along those same lines, Max, I asked Davion just why Penn State and why now? And he just said it's all the culture and the staff. There's great people there that want the best out of you every day. That's not just on the field either. That's in life. It's in the community. The discipline and development they have there, they're a winning program. That's what you want to be coached by. And so that still does go a long way. Like we're not sitting here and, just heads in the clouds or in the sand and ignoring the NIL factor and all this, in that it is a factor, because of course it is. And even guys who say, great development and great community and culture, like they're still going to get paid. Like they're still going to get taken care of. Like they're talented players and they deserve to be. But the way that Penn State has approached this with these guys, I think they deserve a lot of credit. I do. And that's not to say they're not going to get big fish, because they might go out, but they are competing against a lot of top programs. And it does help too that, they're a national title contender, and they made it to the college football playoff semifinals last year. So, for years, James Franklin and the staff have had to sell the fact that this program is on the cusp of something great. And the fact that they were one of the Final Four teams last year and a preseason number one, going into this season, I think gives credence to that.
Yeah, completely changes the outlook. A lot of guys, a lot of high school kids look at that. They've mentioned it when we've talked to them. Like that success alone changes things. But James Franklin has not changed from his pitch the whole time about the type of guys that he wants to recruit. Doesn't work every single time, but it's got a pretty good track record to this point, and his assistants buy all the way in. So it's been really impressive. Like we said, first official visit this weekend. Joey O'Brien, Kari Adams, the two headliners there, but a couple of really good prospects coming to campus. Right now, Penn State's class of 2026, 17 commits, number 4 in the country by some measures. It's a good group. There's going to be a lot more recruiting talk over the summer from you and I, Johnny. And yeah, just appreciate everybody tuning in. Shout out to R Seeker for a lot of comments today. We appreciate the engagement. I hope you enjoyed your noon podcast with us. And just a reminder, we're here every Thursday at noon. Come join us. If you're watching the recording, we appreciate you too. Lots of recruiting coming this summer. Enjoy it. Take care.